Have you ever brought a birthday cake to your own granddaughter's party, only to be told there's no room for you? That's what happened to me. And if it hadn't, I might have gone the rest of my life thinking silence was safer than standing up for yourself. My name's Walter Granger. I'm 65 years old, retired from the Savannah Fire Department, after 38 years of crawling through smoke and flame to pull strangers out of danger. And yet somehow nothing prepared me for the moment my own daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, this party isn't really for you. Can you just maybe hang back on the porch? I'll get to that part in a minute. But you have to understand how it all started. I live alone now in a modest little apartment just east of Victory Drive. Nothing fancy, a one-bedroom with peeling paint and a view of the hardware store. My wife Verna passed 4 years ago from ovarian cancer, and after that, it was just me and the routines that kept me sane: strong coffee, early walks, crossword puzzles in the evening. I thought I was doing okay. Quiet, yes. Lonely, sure. But okay. Until today. See, today was Nora's 6th birthday, my granddaughter Danielle's daughter. Nora's the kind of child who makes you believe in goodness again. Freckles across her nose, always barefoot even in winter, and a laugh that could melt brick walls. I'd spent the week before her birthday carving a little wooden jewelry box for her, just like the one I made for Danielle when she turned 6. I also picked up a cake triple chocolate with raspberry filling her favorite, because Danielle hadn't mentioned one in her text. Yes, a text. That's how invitations go these days. 3 lines: Nora's party this Saturday. Starts at 3. We'll have parents from school co-workers and some of Ethan's clients. You're welcome to stop by. You're welcome to stop by. That's what you say to a neighbor, not your father. But I showed up anyway, in my best collared shirt. Shoes shined. Cake in one hand, gift in the other. Just before ringing the doorbell, I checked my reflection in the window, as if maybe I'd forgotten to age, and Verna might still be beside me holding my arm like she always did. Danielle opened the door. She looked beautiful, always has, but her eyes didn't light up when she saw me. "Dad," she said, eyebrows raised. "You're early." It was 2:55. "I can walk around the block if you want." I joked, lifting the cake slightly. Didn't want to be late to my favorite girl's birthday. She didn't laugh, just stepped aside and motioned toward the porch. "Can you leave the cake on the side table? We already have one inside. There's not a lot of room." I froze for a second. "I brought it for Nora. It's her favorite, I know," she cut in quickly. "But there's just not a lot of space. We have seating inside for the kids and the adults who RSVP'd." I looked past her into the house. I could see Ethan in the living room with 3 men in sports jackets and a few women in yoga wear holding wine glasses. Laughter, balloons. There were decorations and a big sign that read Nora's 6 hanging over the kitchen entryway. But no space. Not for me. "You can hang back on the porch if you don't mind," she added, lowering her voice. "It's just, professional people. Ethan's got a couple clients here." I set the cake down slowly as if it might break. Not the cake. Something else. I smiled even though my chest was tightening. "Sure," I said. "The porch is fine." I'd been through burning houses, but somehow this felt worse. The porch was nice enough, clean shaded with a few folding chairs set out along the rail. But it wasn't where the laughter was. It wasn't where my granddaughter was blowing candles or unwrapping presents. It was where people left their purses and diaper bags. I sat there for almost 20 minutes, sipping from a lukewarm bottle of water someone had left behind. From where I sat, I could hear Nora's giggle through the open windows, Ethan's voice booming over others, Danielle's laugh too loud, too performative. They were entertaining. They were impressing. And I was invisible. A few guests came out to make phone calls or check their hair. One woman smiled politely and asked if I was the gardener. I said nothing. I kept thinking of Verna. She would have walked right into that kitchen, placed the cake on the table and said, "Our granddaughter turned 6 today. That matters more than your image." But Verna wasn't here, and I was alone. When Nora finally came outside holding a helium balloon, her eyes lit up. "Grandpa." She ran to me like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't been shunted to the edge of her life. "I missed you," she said, hugging my neck. "Did you see my cake?" I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. "I brought you another one. Your favorite." Her eyes widened. "Triple chocolate," I smiled. "With raspberry." She squealed and ran back inside, shouting, "Mommy, Grandpa brought chocolate cake." A few seconds passed. Then the sliding door opened. Danielle stepped out, her face tight. "Dad," she hissed, "I told you we already had cake." I didn't say a word to her. She asked. I replied calmly. Danielle glanced around, clearly anxious someone might hear. "Please, you're making this weird." I stood up, slowly. My knees protested, but my pride overruled the pain. "I've been sitting out here for 30 minutes, Danielle," I said. "You couldn't find one chair for me at my granddaughter's party." She crossed her arms. "Don't do this. Not here. Not now." I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and pulled out a folder. It was thin manila worn around the edges. I'd brought it with me, not out of planning, but instinct. I held it up. Maybe now's exactly the time. Her face went pale. "What is that?" I handed it to her. "Deed to this house. The one I helped buy. Remember that she didn't take it. Just stared at it like it was poison." "You promised that was temporary," she whispered. "You promised I'd be family," I replied. "Not a lawn ornament." The door opened again. Ethan stepped out, looking between us. "What's going on?" I looked him in the eye. "Just sharing a few life stories," I said evenly. The kind nobody likes to tell in front of the neighbors. Danielle snatched the folder and flipped it open. Her jaw tightened. "You never changed it," she said. "After all these years." "No, I didn't. Because I didn't think I'd need to." Ethan stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "Is this real? You think I made it up?" I asked. "You think I'm sitting on a porch in the heat for the thrill of it?" Danielle's voice trembled now. "You waited for this. You waited for the moment you could use it to humiliate me." "No, Danielle." I said, my voice low. "I waited for the moment you made it clear I didn't belong." Silence. Even Nora, now inside again, was quiet. Ethan looked at me, then at his wife. "We should talk. Later." "No," Danielle said sharply. "We'll talk now. Or never." I shook my head. "This isn't about the deed. It's about dignity. You invited me like an afterthought, banished me to the porch, and treated me like I was in the way. I've been in burning buildings where people showed more kindness." Danielle opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have a retort. Not one that mattered. I took the cake from the table and placed it carefully beside the folder. "You want to throw me out," I said. Fine, but you'll have to throw out the man who bought this roof, and the man who still knows what respect is supposed to feel like. Then I turned and walked. I didn't look back. Not at the porch. Not at the door. Not at the family that no longer saw me as anything but an inconvenience. The cab ride home was quiet. The box of cake sat on my lap, still unopened. You ever wonder when your life stops being about love and starts being about leverage? That's the kind of truth we never put in greeting cards, but it's what real-life stories are made of. And this one was mine. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was unsure of what I'd done. No, for once in a long time I was certain. But certainty doesn't mean peace. It just means you're awake with your eyes open, staring at the ceiling, knowing that something's broken. And you might have been the one to snap it in two. The next morning I made coffee. Didn't even finish the cup. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a message. A missed call. Anything. Nothing. Not from Danielle. Not from Ethan. Not even from Nora. Though to be fair, I doubted she understood what had happened. 6 is too young to grasp betrayal, but just old enough to feel it in the room. By noon, I'd almost convinced myself to call, just to clear the air. But before I could reach for the phone, it rang. Ethan. I hesitated before answering. Walter, he said. Can we talk? His tone was neutral, not angry, not warm, just steady. Of course, I replied. When I'll come to you? In an hour. He hung up before I could say more. I spent the next 45 minutes pacing the apartment, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, straightening books on shelves I hadn't touched in months. It wasn't nerves, at least that's what I told myself. It was containment. Holding in everything I wanted to say, so I wouldn't explode when the moment came. Ethan arrived dressed casual, no jacket, no tie, just jeans and a tired expression. We sat at my small kitchen table. No coffee, no pleasantries, just the weight of what had happened the day before. I didn't know the house was still in your name, he said. I figured as much, I replied. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. You really kept it that way all these years? I really did. Why? That word hung between us like smoke. Heavy, unwelcome. I guess I began slowly. I was waiting to see who you both became. Ethan tilted his head. That's not trust, Walter. No, I said. It's not. But it's experience. You think just because someone's blood, they'll never shut you out. Life teaches otherwise. He looked down at the table, ran his fingers along the edge. Danielle is furious, he said. She thinks you embarrassed her on purpose. She embarrassed herself, I said, maybe a little too sharply. I brought a cake and a gift. I sat quietly where I was told. She made a scene because she thought the presence of her own father might tarnish her guest list. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. You're not wrong, he said quietly, but you could have handled it differently. Maybe, I admitted. But tell me something, Ethan. If I'd stayed silent, would anything have changed? He didn't answer, and that said everything. There's a difference between starting a fire and revealing one was already burning. I didn't ruin the party. I just lit a match in a house soaked with resentment. And that's when Ethan said something I didn't expect. I think you should come back. I blinked. To the house, he nodded. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Nora's been asking why you left. And to be honest, so have I. I didn't know what to say to that. After all the silence, after all the distance. Why now? He must have sensed my hesitation because he added, "Look, Walter, we didn't handle things right, Danielle especially. But maybe it's not too late to reset." Reset. It sounded simple, but anyone who's lived long enough knows you don't reset life stories like you do a phone. There's no factory default for hurt. Still, the fact that he was here in my kitchen asking it meant something, maybe even enough to keep talking. Ethan didn't stay long after that. He stood, said he had some calls to make, thanked me for talking, and walked out the door like a man carrying too many pieces of something he didn't know how to reassemble. I watched him go from the window, his back slightly hunched, the way it does when someone's thinking too hard for too long. I didn't expect what came next. That night, just after 9, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Danielle. 3 words. "You lied." Again. Before I could type a reply, the screen lit up with an incoming call. I picked up. "You met with Ethan behind my back." Her voice was sharp, cold, but not raised. That was worse. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone even. "He called me, and you just said yes. Like that. I didn't think I needed your permission to speak with my son-in-law." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. "You told him we handled things wrong." I told him the truth. "You humiliated me in front of my friends, and now you're trying to turn my husband against me." I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I did no such thing," I said. "You treated me like a problem." He noticed. "That's not manipulation, that's observation." Danielle let out a soft, bitter laugh. "You waited 5 years with that deed in your pocket just to do this, to get some twisted form of payback." "No," I replied. "I waited 5 years hoping I wouldn't have to use it, hoping respect would be enough." "You want respect?" she snapped. "Is that what this is about?" I didn't answer immediately. My jaw tightened. "Yes," I said finally. "Respect. Recognition. Not as a wallet. Not as a doorman. As your father." Another silence. Then she said it, soft, dangerous, "Choose, him or me." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "Excuse me. You heard me. You've already poisoned Ethan against me. You've made it clear you're still pulling strings. So either you stay out of our lives completely, or I'll be the one walking away." I closed my eyes. "Danielle, this isn't about sides. It is now." Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, though the call was over. A dull ringing in the silence. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just stared at the stack of old fire inspection reports I kept on the bookshelf, relics from a time when problems had codes and procedures, when a red tag meant something was broken and you knew exactly how to fix it. But this wasn't a gas line. It was a daughter's heart, and I'd either broken it or exposed just how broken it had been all along. The next morning, Ethan showed up at my door again. His face was pale. His voice was tired. "She left," he said. I stepped back, letting him in. He didn't wait for an invitation. Packed a bag. Took Nora. Said she was staying at her friend Lauren's. Said she'd come back for the rest later. I stood there unsure of what to feel. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "I'm not," Ethan replied. That caught me off guard. "I tried to talk to her," he continued. tried to explain that this wasn't about control or leverage, that it was about how we treat people, but she didn't want to hear it. He sat down on the edge of my couch, head in his hands. "You didn't break us, Walter," he said. "She made her choice long before you ever pulled out that folder." I believed him. And yet, I still felt like I'd just dropped a match and watched the whole house go up. You ever try to do the right thing and still lose everything? That's the part they never tell you about growing old. It's not just the body that aches. It's the choices that stay sore long after the moment passes. That night I sat at the window again, alone with the lights off. The world beyond my glass was still turning. A car alarm went off in the distance. A couple laughed as they passed on the sidewalk. And in that stillness, I thought, maybe this is how some life stories begin, not with triumph, but with fracture. Not with redemption, but with rupture. And maybe that's not the end. Just the cost of telling the truth. 3 days passed. Long, quiet, repetitive days, the kind that feel like they're standing still just to watch you squirm. The apartment was silent again, but not like before. Before it had been a peaceful kind of quiet. A widow's quiet. A man who's learned to live with loneliness quiet. This was different. This was the kind of silence that hums. The kind that stings the ears. I didn't hear from Danielle. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a message from Nora, who'd left behind her favorite pink sunglasses on the kitchen counter at Ethan's house. Ethan didn't call either. I assumed he needed space. Or maybe he was afraid I did. Truth is, we were both just trying to figure out what the hell had happened. You ever look at your life and wonder, when did it all shift sideways, and why didn't I notice until it was too late? Because that's what I was doing. Every day. Every minute. On the 4th afternoon, I decided to take a walk. My left knee protested, but I needed the air. I hadn't stepped beyond my apartment complex since that awful Saturday. Felt like I was serving a sentence, and parole came in the form of a Georgia breeze. I didn't plan to run into her. Evelyn Price. She was standing in her front yard watering a bed of dying azaleas. Her wide straw hat drooped slightly in the back, and her terrier Banjo yapped at a squirrel like his life depended on it. "Walter Granger," she said, setting down the hose. "I haven't seen you in a minute." I smiled as best I could. "Been laying low," I admitted. I figured. Word travels. Savannah might be a city, but our street's still a small town. I nodded. I knew what that meant. Danielle had friends. Her friend Lauren, the one she was staying with, lived just a few blocks away. "I didn't mean for it to go public," I said. "Public or not, truth has a way of getting out." She looked at me for a moment. Really looked like she was checking for cracks I hadn't patched yet. "Tea," she offered. "I wouldn't be good company." "That's fine." I didn't ask for good. I asked for honest. That line made me smile. First time in days. Her home was warm, lived in. It smelled like lemon polish and cinnamon with soft jazz playing low from a dusty speaker in the corner. Family photos covered the fireplace mantel, sons, grandkids, even a few black and white snapshots that looked like they belonged in a museum. We sat at a small table by the window. She poured the tea without asking how I liked it. "Start at the middle," she said. "That's where the pain lives." I told her everything, not just the party, not just the folder. I told her about Verna, about the decision to keep the house in my name, about Danielle's anger, Ethan's surprise, the phone call, The ultimatum. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer cliches or excuses. When I was done, she leaned back and said, "Sounds like she thought you were the fire, when really, you were just the smoke alarm no one wanted to hear." That sat with me. Heavy. Accurate. "You think I overreacted?" I asked. She sipped her tea. "I think you reacted after too many years of staying quiet." We sat in silence for a while after that, letting the words breathe. Then she asked, "What do you want, Walter, truly? If none of this had happened, what would you have wanted most?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window at the street, at the house where I'd spent so many weekends helping Ethan with the gutters, where Nora learned to ride her bike, where Danielle once called me her favorite person in the world. I wanted to be seen, I said at last. Not obeyed, not praised, just seen. Evelyn nodded slowly. "You deserved that." She reached across the table and placed her hand lightly over mine. No pressure, just presence. And for a moment, a fleeting, fragile moment, I wasn't just a man who'd lost his daughter. I was a man who'd been heard. I didn't plan to stay long at Evelyn's, but sometimes time folds differently when someone's actually listening. We sat for another hour, maybe more, talking about kids, about loss, about the long shadow a parent casts even when they don't mean to. She was close with Verna, wasn't she? Evelyn asked gently. Too close, I said. Sometimes I wonder if that was the problem. How so? I leaned back, tracing a faint scratch on the wooden table with my thumb. Verna was the glue, I said. The softness, the warmth. I was the provider, the fixer, the one who reminded everyone to wear their seatbelt and check the thermostat. She was the reason birthdays felt like holidays. The reason Danielle called home in college every Sunday. Evelyn nodded, not with pity, but with understanding. When Verna got sick, Danielle couldn't handle it. I continued. She got quiet, then angry, then cold. At first I thought it was the grief, but grief changes people, and not always for the better. You think she blames you? Evelyn asked. I looked up. She doesn't say it, but I see it in the way she looks at me when I talk about Mom. As if I let her die. As if I didn't fight hard enough. Did you? I exhaled. We did everything. Every doctor, every trial, but it wasn't enough. Evelyn took a sip of her tea, then said something that surprised me. She probably needed someone to blame, and you were the only one left standing. I hadn't thought of it that way. Or maybe I had and just didn't want to admit it. Maybe Danielle didn't see me as weak or controlling. Maybe she saw me as the last person connected to a time when things still made sense. And that connection scared her. Grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like control, like gatekeeping, like pushing away the only person who reminds you of what you lost. She resents the fact that I'm still here, I said softly. While Verna isn't. That Evelyn said isn't fair. But it makes sense. We sat in silence after that. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence you share with someone who's seen storms and knows not every cloud needs a name. When I finally stood up to leave, Evelyn didn't ask me to stay longer. She just walked me to the door and said, "Come by again." Anytime. I did. Many times, in fact. But that's another thread in this tapestry. That same evening, Ethan called. "She still hasn't come back," he said. "But Nora asked if you could read to her over video tonight. She misses your stories." The ache in my chest tightened, part sorrow, part something softer. "I'd love to," I said. He paused, then added, "I've been thinking, this house is too quiet. I know it's not ideal, but would you consider staying here for a while? At least until we figure out next steps." I hesitated. Living in that house, the house I paid for, the house I'd once been exiled from, it felt strange. But also, right. "I'll pack a bag," I told him. The next morning I moved in, quietly. No announcement, no furniture trucks. Just me, a few clothes, my tool set, and the book Nora loved, Charlotte's Web. The house looked the same. White trim ivy climbing the back fence, the swing I installed, still creaking faintly on the porch. But inside, it was hollow. Danielle's absence was a presence in itself. Ethan and I didn't talk much at first. We moved around each other like two men in a strange kind of mourning. He went to work. I cleaned the gutters. He reheated dinner. I repainted the chipped porch rail. Every now and then we talked. Not about Danielle, but about Nora. About taxes. About baseball. About how life sometimes takes everything apart before it builds something new. One night after dinner, Ethan finally said what had been sitting between us for days. She was always trying to control everything after her mom died. I thought she just needed time. But now I think she needed distance from you. From herself. I nodded. I gave her both. It still wasn't enough. She's not a villain, Walter. But she's hurt. And maybe she thinks pushing you away is the only way to stay in control. I know, I said. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. No. But maybe we can learn from it. And I think we are. Little by little. The next morning I made breakfast, set out 2 mugs of coffee, one for me, one for Ethan. He smiled when he walked into the kitchen and saw it. Trying to win me over with burnt toast and lukewarm coffee, he joked. "It's a tradition in this house," I replied. We laughed. And for the first time since that day on the porch, I didn't feel like an intruder in my own story. I felt human again. Some mornings feel like they arrive on tiptoe, quiet, hesitant, unsure of their welcome. That was how Thursday began. I'd only been staying with Ethan for a week, but it felt like a month had passed. Not because of time, but because of weight. Emotional weight. Like every word we didn't say added an extra pound to the air between us. But something was shifting. Slowly. Deliberately. I woke up early as usual. Old habits from firehouse days never die. Even at 65, I was still up by 5:30 brewing strong coffee and pacing the kitchen before the sun had fully crested over the rooftops of Magnolia Drive. I'd taken it upon myself to fix small things around the house. Not as a favor. Not out of obligation. Just because they needed fixing and because fixing things is how I think. Leaky faucet. Loose cabinet hinge. The broken step on the back deck that I'd warned Ethan about 2 years ago. All of it now quietly, finally restored. That morning I was reattaching a crooked gutter bracket when Ethan stepped out onto the porch. "You always this productive before breakfast?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Only when the ladder doesn't wobble," I replied, tightening the bolt. He smiled. I climbed down and wiped my hands on an old rag. "You know," he said, "this house looks better than it did before Danielle left." I didn't respond right away. The comment hung there, not cruel, not mocking. Just true. I'm not fixing it to prove anything, I said after a moment. I didn't say you were. But maybe I'm fixing more than just gutters. He nodded. Yeah. I see that. We went back inside, the silence now less awkward and more companionable. At breakfast, Nora called from Danielle's phone. She wanted to say good morning. Wanted me to know she'd drawn a picture of the swing set, the one I built. Ethan held the phone out on speaker, and I listened as her tiny voice explained every color crayon she used. She didn't mention her mother. I didn't ask. After the call ended, Ethan looked at me across the table. "She misses you," he said. "I miss her more than I can say." He set his mug down. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "You don't need to just stay in the guest room. You could make this permanent. The house is big enough. Nora loves you, and I don't know, maybe we all need a reset." I stared at him, unsure whether what I was hearing was an invitation or a new arrangement born out of guilt and consequence. "I'm not trying to replace Danielle," I said carefully. "You're not," Ethan replied. "But you've earned the right to be here. Not as a guest, as family." That word sat heavy. I looked around the kitchen, same tile I helped install during the renovation. The window where Verna once stood, watching the garden come to life. The chair where I'd first held Nora as a baby. This was a house full of memories, some soft, some sharp. I stood up, walked into the living room, and retrieved the folder. The one that had upended everything. I brought it back to the table, sat down, and opened it. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "My name," I said, tapping the deed on a piece of paper that caused a war I never wanted. He waited, watching me. "I think it's time I give it up," I said. "Officially." Ethan's eyes widened. "You don't have to, I know," I interrupted gently. But this was never about control. It was about feeling seen. And I've felt more seen this week than I have in 5 years. He said nothing. Just nodded, a deep, sincere nod that said more than any thank you ever could. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves. Something in me shifted too. It wasn't just about a house. It never was. It was about choosing to stay, not because I had leverage, but because I finally had belonging. The next afternoon, I drove downtown. Savannah's courthouse is a quiet building, all brick and symmetry, with an old magnolia tree growing stubbornly out of the concrete walkway out front. I'd been there once before, years ago, when Verna and I finalized the purchase of the property. I remembered how proud we were. 2 high school sweethearts from Statesboro who managed to own a home outright in their 60s. A house meant to keep our family safe for decades. Funny how time reshapes meaning. Inside, the clerk asked if I had an appointment. I said no, but I had a decision. "I'd like to transfer this deed," I told her, sliding the envelope across the counter. She took one look at the documents and gave me a careful glance, the kind people reserve for elderly men making irreversible choices. "Are you sure, Mr. Granger?" she asked. "Once it's notarized and filed, it's permanent." I smiled gently. So is growing up. So is letting go. It took 27 minutes. Not that I was counting. When it was done, I stepped outside and stood under that magnolia tree for a long while. Its roots had cracked the concrete in places, refusing to yield. I liked that about it. Even planted in the wrong place, it still insisted on thriving. I drove home slowly. Windows down. Breeze in my face. A strange calm washed over me, not joy, not sadness, just a quiet kind of peace. When I walked through the front door, Ethan was in the living room with a load of laundry in his arms. He looked up. "How'd it go?" "It's done," I said. He set the laundry down and stepped closer. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied. Just help me finish repainting the porch swing tomorrow. He laughed, not the forced kind, but the kind that says we're really going to be okay. That night, Nora insisted I read Charlotte's Web from her bedroom instead of via phone. I tucked her in, pulled the old worn copy from her shelf, and read the same chapter we always did, the one where Charlotte weaves some pig into her web. "Grandpa," she whispered before falling asleep. "You're like Charlotte." I blinked. "How so? You see what people don't see. You make things better." Quietly. I kissed her forehead and turned off the lamp. In the hallway, I stood for a long moment staring at the closed door. Maybe that was what I had been doing all along, weaving a web of protection connection, belonging one thread at a time, hoping someone would notice. And now, finally, someone had. Ethan and I worked together over the next few days, not just on the swing, but on unspoken things, repairing the invisible. He told me Danielle had texted, short messages, cold, no sign of return. But I could hear the hesitation behind her silence. Anger, yes, but confusion too. I didn't hate her for it. I didn't even resent her anymore. I just hoped she'd come back whole, not to the house, but to herself. Because in the end, this story, like all life stories, isn't about winning. It's about returning to the center of who you are, even if the road is long and winding. Ethan offered to celebrate the deed transfer. "I'll cook," he said. "Real food, not just microwaved lasagna." I raised an eyebrow. "That'll be the real miracle." We laughed again. It came easier now. That evening, over baked chicken and fresh corn, I looked around the table. There was no big toast, no grand gesture. Just the sound of a family finding its rhythm again, a new rhythm, quieter but honest. And maybe that was enough. Maybe after all these years of waiting to be welcomed back into a space I helped build. The truth was this: I never really left. I had only stepped back, waiting for the right time to step forward again, with dignity, with clarity, and with peace. Some endings come with fireworks. Others arrive like fog, slow, quiet, and only noticeable once you're in the middle of them. But some endings, they don't feel like endings at all. They feel like home. That's what the weeks felt like after I signed the house over. Peaceful, simple, unremarkable to the outside world, but monumental to me. I'd started planting a small garden in the back. Nothing fancy, just tomatoes, peppers, and a row of marigolds that Nora picked out from the nursery down on Abercorn. She liked the orange ones best, because they look like sunshine, Grandpa, she said. She helped me water them every other afternoon after school. It became our little ritual. She'd talk about her day, about spelling bees, her class turtle, a girl named Maddie, who never shared crayons. And I'd listen, not because I had advice, but because I finally had time. Real time. Not rushed. Not obligated. Just presence. It's strange, isn't it? How the same space that once made you feel invisible can begin to feel sacred again once your presence isn't up for debate. I found myself laughing more, eating slower, sleeping better. Not because life got easier, but because it stopped feeling like a test I was always failing. Ethan was different too, more relaxed, less guarded. One morning he left a coffee mug on the counter, a simple white one that read, "Want Dad," in faded letters. I hadn't seen it in years. "You kept this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Found it in the garage. Figured you earned it back." I smiled quietly, placing it next to the percolator. There were no grand apologies between us, no teary speeches, Just small things like shared silence on the porch swing, a screwdriver handed at just the right moment, or a second helping of potatoes passed without asking. If you've ever rebuilt a relationship in your later years, you'll understand. It's not the big gestures that matter most. It's being seen, being heard, being wanted without condition. What about you? Have you ever lost something only to discover that what came after was gentler, stronger, more yours than what you had before? One Saturday, Evelyn came over with banana bread. Warm, wrapped in a dish towel with a handwritten note for the man who fixes things without asking. She sat on the back porch while Nora colored sidewalk chalk patterns at our feet. "You've changed," Evelyn said, sipping sweet tea. "Older or wiser?" "More here," she replied. "More settled." I think I said, watching Nora draw a sun with a crooked smile. I stopped waiting to be invited. I just showed up. And stayed. She nodded. "You know," she added after a pause, "there's a storytelling group at the senior center. They meet every Thursday night. True stories, life stories, nothing fancy. Just people who've seen things and need to speak." I raised an eyebrow. "You think I've got something to say? I think you've lived it, and there's folks who need to hear it." I didn't answer right away, but something stirred inside me, the quiet hum of purpose. Maybe my story wasn't over yet. Maybe it was just beginning. Again. The first time I spoke at the storytelling group, my hands trembled. Not from fear exactly, but from memory. The room was small, maybe 15 folding chairs set in a circle. The smell of cinnamon rolls and old carpet hung in the air. Most folks were my age or older. Some had walkers. One gentleman in a Vietnam vet jacket had a notepad, but never wrote anything down. When it was my turn, I stood up, cleared my throat, looked around at the expectant faces. "I didn't come here to perform," I began. "I came because I was tired of being erased in my own life." Someone in the back gave a soft, like they'd just sipped something warm. "I'm not here to badmouth my daughter, or to cry about what was done to me. I'm here because, after 65 years, I realized no one was going to hand me my dignity. I had to claim it myself. And so I told them about the birthday party, about the locked door, about the silence that followed. I told them about Evelyn and Ethan and the marigolds. And then I said, this life doesn't always give us a neat ending, but it does offer us one thing, the chance to show up. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when we've been told we're no longer needed. That room, that old carpeted room with weak coffee and flickering lights, gave me more than just a place to talk. It gave me back my voice. When I finished, no one clapped. They didn't need to. One woman stood up, walked over, and pressed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. That was my story, too. Later that week, I told Evelyn I'd go again. Every Thursday night. Because sometimes life stories aren't just told to be heard, they're told to heal. Nora asked me what I talked about. Real things, I said. Things grown-ups forget to say out loud. Like love, she asked. Like love. And like pain. And how both can live in the same room without fighting. She nodded solemnly, as only a child can. That night, I sat on the porch with Evelyn. She handed me a notepad. "You should write it down," she said. "Your life, piece by piece. For who? For whoever needs it." I looked down at the blank page. Maybe I'd start with the porch swing, or the banana bread, or the moment my granddaughter called me Charlotte the Spider. Maybe it didn't matter where I started. What mattered was that I had. Because this life, my life, is worthy of being told. Not just remembered in fragments, but lived fully in the present tense. And if someone somewhere ever stumbles across my story on a quiet Thursday night, perhaps on a channel like Brian's Story, I hope they'll hear this message. You are not too old to begin again. You are not too late to matter. You are not invisible unless you choose silence. I am Walter Granger, and this is one of many life stories still unfolding. So if you've ever sat quietly at the edge of your own life waiting to be invited in, don't wait. Tell your story. Out loud. Right now. We're listening. This has been Brian's Story, where every voice deserves its moment. If this story touched something in you, let us know in the comments. Subscribe to Brian's Story for more real voices, quiet strength, and unforgettable life stories. Because some stories aren't loud, but they stay with you.